Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Films. My name is Alan. As you guys all probably know by now, I love sci-fi films. I try to watch each and every movie that comes out every year that is in that genre. One trend I've noticed a lot in the last decade is the use of white uniforms or white armor for bad guys. Now traditionally in Western culture, white symbolizes purity, holiness, and all things that are good. So it's interesting to see so many Western films use that color to now portray evil. But it's rather fitting for the sci-fi genre. Sci-fi has always been the literature of ideas. Whereas classic literature builds on and refines the human experience as we know it, sci-fi boldly heads into the unknown, pushing the bounds of human understanding by trying to predict the path our civilization will one day head in. It's sadly something that most sci-fi films get wrong nowadays. The whole genre is about pushing boundaries and turning conventions upside down. But unfortunately, many direct-to-DVD or Netflix sci-fi movies are so bad because they're full of cliches and seek to emulate the movies that have already pioneered a certain corner of the sci-fi space. A lot of sci-fi films focus on how human society will evolve. Whether it's George Orwell's 1984 or George Lucas's THX 1138, the generations that came before us predicted that as society became more mature and less chaotic, it would also become more regulated, controlled, and eventually, conformity would destroy individuality, and our world would become a sterile, cold place devoid of color and art. In their place would be a clean and organized facade of uniformity and harmony. Star Wars has always played around with this concept, and it's used white to symbolize uniformity. It's prevalent throughout all the films, from the original trilogy to the new trilogy. The stormtroopers and their shiny white helmets and armor are a literal representation of the machine men that Charlie Chaplin warned us about. These humans hide their faces behind identical masks to commit unspeakable horrors. The additional lore surrounding the stormtroopers shows just how regulated their lives were. The helmets which they wore featured recording devices that listened to everything they said and watched everything they did. A stormtrooper who removed his or her helmet while on duty was also punished. A stormtrooper who scuffed up their perfect white armor also was reprimanded. Anything that ruined this illusion of uniformity was treated as a cancer by the Empire. In Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, once again we see strong usage of white and sterile environments on the oceanic world of Kamino. The Kaminoans are clone masters who have secretly created an army of soldiers for the Republic in their time of need. But what's hidden behind their clean and orderly surface is a race of aliens who are completely devoid of emotion and feelings. They cruelly experimented with clones as if they were inanimate objects, terminating those they felt were too weak or too individualistic. White once again is used as the ultimate sign of conformity and the evils that it can bring along with it. Sometimes white is also used to cover up evil intentions. As we stated before, most Western cultures associate white with good things. So in films like the Total Recall remake and Hunger Games, the peacekeeping officers are all equipped with white uniforms in an attempt to make them seem more approachable to the general population. But of course, these peacekeepers and their white uniforms are designed to hide the real motive behind the terrible regimes that they work for. In The Lord of the Rings, Saruman the White Wizard also uses his color to hide his more nefarious dealings, but eventually his evil deeds dirty his cloak, and Gandalf, who has managed to stay pure, takes over his mantle. While white is a symbol of purity, it can also be a symbol of zealotry and extremism. In the post-apocalyptic sci-fi film Snowpiercer, the world is frozen over, and all of the remaining surviving humans are stuck on a nuclear train. Tilda Swinton's character, Minister Mason, is a fanatical dictator who controls all of these humans with an iron fist. She is cruel and heartless and orders her underlings to perform terrible deeds against their fellow man, all in the name of order and the survival of the human race. She also encourages the passengers of the train to worship the mighty engine in a cult-like way. It's the only thing that's driving the nuclear train, and it's the only thing that's keeping them all alive and well. If you haven't seen this movie, by the way, it's really well done, and Tilda Swinton is at her most diabolical. Other examples of this type of character is Director Krennic from Rogue One, the fanatical engineer who manages the Death Star program. Then there's President Snow, the dictator of a futuristic Earth in the Hunger Games franchise, and Chancellor Ava Page from the Maze Runner films. In Western culture, excessively pale skin is associated with unhealthy or sick individuals. The common perception is a person with pale skin spends the majority of their time indoors on their computer playing video games, plotting terrible things against other people, and making YouTube videos. Basically, you're a social outcast. Or in the case of the Hobbit, they literally live in a cave like Azog, the Defiler, otherwise known as the Pale Orc. The Da Vinci Code also uses this type of character when creating its albino assassin, who is a part of the Opus Dei cult in the book and the film. This trope is also commonly used in sci-fi films. There's the creepy albino twins from The Matrix Reloaded, and also the engineers from the newer films in the Alien franchise. In Asian culture, white is also associated with purity, but at the same time it's also associated with funerals, death, and sadness. So in Asian cinema, a lot of the evil or bad characters are oftentimes wearing white. That's basically what happens in every John Woo film. Consequently, wearing white also allows blood to show up in a much clearer way. Also in Kung Fu Panda 2, the main bad guy, Lord Shen, is a white peacock who represented death and destruction for the main character. This trope would also be used in sci-fi films like the G.I. Joe franchise, which features Storm Shadow, a ninja special forces soldier who dressed in all white and commonly fought against the Joes. So those are a few of the reasons why white is commonly associated with bad or evil characters in sci-fi films. I also like to mention that I'm very proud of myself for doing this entire video without mentioning race even once. Until now. In all seriousness though, I do think it's very interesting that different cultures from around the world associate certain colors with certain things. I think these kind of patterns and traditions are just waiting to be broken by the next great sci-fi writer. Well guys, thanks for joining us today. My name is Alan, reminding you that life is a movie and you are the protagonist.